Alright guys, well we've been moving along pretty well with the gaps on this car. I've got the front fenders on the vehicle and got the hood in place. Everything's loose right now. Well, with the front fenders, I was at the start of the top. So I'll get my fasteners in here on the cowl as well as on the core support there. I'll bring them down but leave them loose. I'll take and set the level of the fender, the top of the fender, level the top of the door. And I'll set my gap. And then I'll start dancing with these little clips here. And depending on the thickness I need, I'll pick and choose what I need, put them in, and tighten the bolt down. If the fender drops down, I use a thicker clip. Rarely does it ever go up. So you just have to get the right combination of these clips installed and set that space up. So once that is set, and this gap is good in through here, work my way to the bottom. And there's two fasteners on the bottom of these fenders. And again, you work with these clips until you get the right combination. If you don't have enough clips and you bolt the fender up too tight to the body, it'll actually buckle the fender out and it'll stick out past the door, which is what you don't want. You can have this gap set just right, but if it's sticking out this way, that doesn't look right. So then you start inserting these little clips, spacing the fender down, and slowly bringing that fender in until you are even with the door here. So once that is set, we go on the other side, do that one. The front is still loose at this point. I have my inner wheel liners in, the inner wheel wells, they're all installed, but they're loose again. You don't tighten anything up until you have this established, because otherwise those will create stresses on the fender that you don't want. If you reef them down in the wrong spot, you're going to again fight with this gap here. So then once this is set, the other side's set, we get the hood on. Setting up a hood can get tricky pretty quickly. What I like to usually do is take my hinges, bolt them to the inner fenders, set them about halfway on the holes. Then I get the hood up on top, and again, set these bolts up about halfway on these holes. The next thing I do is take and I remove the latching mechanism. So when I bring the hood down, it doesn't latch, and I don't have to keep on latching it, but you're going to be opening this hood a number of times. And the other thing is, if the latching mechanism isn't on center, it's going to throw your alignment off as well. So I leave that till later. The front valance is also loose here, so I'm not worried about that yet. Everything at the back is pretty much set. You have your bolts in place here on the top of the cowl. You got them set to the top of the doors, so those are pretty much set up where they need to be. Then I take the hood and I bring it down. And I check my alignment on each side of the fenders, check the consistency of those lines, and then I make sure that the top of the hood is even with the top of the fenders. If it's not, then I start making my adjustments. For instance, if the top of the hood on this side is a little bit higher than the top of the fender, what I'll do is I'll loosen these two bolts, and I'll take and leave one bolt, the bottom bolt, a little bit snug, and I'll loosen off the top one. I'll take the hood and I'll rotate it ever so slightly. Sometimes I'll use a piece of masking tape as a reference line because you're just moving a 1/16 of an inch, not very much. And I'll tighten everything back down, bring the hood down, and I'll check my alignment. If that's good, then I'll check my alignment with the sides of the fenders. Now, if this gap is starting to open up, that means that the fender is diving in too quickly. So I make my adjustments on the core support here. Sometimes you might have everything tightened down, all the gaps look good, but everything's off to one side. So it looks like the car is going to the left or to the right. What you have to do at that point is take and readjust your alignment on the core support in relation to your subframe. So, like I mentioned before, it's a very delicate dance. It takes time, and you just have to have a lot of patience. And well, with this hood here, whoever had the hood before us, they've stepped on it, they've stretched it, it has a twist to it. So we've been working with that to untwist, unbend. All the damage has been done. And well, we're getting really close to where we need to be. I'm going to bring the hood down, show you guys all the gaps, and see where we are at this stage in the game. We are very close, but we still haven't gotten the front valance on. And the gaps on each side aren't too bad. We might have to re-arch the hood just a bit more in the front and then level it out at the back because, well, you'll see what I mean in a minute. All right, let me bring the hood down. I'll show you what I'm talking about. So it springs up a little bit because it's up on the rubbers. That's fine. First off, get the center of the hood. So somebody must have stepped on it because I can get at least 2 thicknesses of cardboard in underneath this straight edge here at the front. So we're going to have to take this area here, strip it down, and bring up that center section. What I am looking at are the gaps between the fender and the hood. You can see the gap here on the driver's side. A little bit tighter at the front than at the back, but overall it's pretty consistent. But if you look at the back of the hood there, we can narrow that gap up on the between the fender by re-arching that hood. See on the driver's side there, it comes up a lot sharper than over on the passenger side. It's been bent. So we have to take and straighten that bend out. By doing that, it'll widen the back and it'll allow the hood to sit properly. So then that gap will be pretty much consistent from front to back on this side. Now if we come to the passenger side, we have an identical gap going to the back. A little tighter at the front, wider at the back. So again, by fixing that curve along the back there, by flattening it out so it has a proper curve, we can correct the width of the back of the hood. You can see the top of the hood is even with the top of the fenders over there as well as over there. And now we can move towards the front and get the top valance set and work our way down from there. So I mentioned earlier that this aftermarket piece here, this headlight area was diving in and didn't align with the face of this headlight area here. Well, there was a step there. So before we got the fenders on, we took and massaged this area outward so that when we hopefully bolt these pieces together, everything aligns properly. If not, we might have to get in there with a dolly and just bring it out a little bit further or just massage it, depending which way it has to go. So I'm going to get these bolted in place. Let's see how that looks. When you're working on a project car like this, be prepared to experience different types of fasteners because, well, this car, it's had metric in place, it's had, I'm just looking at the reflection on the top of this headlight bucket, it's got a little dip in there, it shouldn't be there. We have to take care of that so we don't have any filler there. So right now, I'm going to line things up here. I'm just curious to see when we bring the hood down how close we are, how tight this gap is at the front here. That's coming together really nice here. Okay, let me get those bolts in over here. Now I'm going to bring the hood down and we'll see the gap. Bingo. See what I just did there? So we always have to make sure that we are in proper alignment. It looked good through here. It looked good through here. Well, a little bit low there. As soon as I picked up that nose, boom, we close our gap in. So I'm going to tighten these two areas up here. We have about 5/16 gap there. A little bit less on this side, and again, it's because of the stamping. So we're gonna have to take and massage this rear edge, move it over. But aside from that, we're coming out pretty good. Once you get the ends pinned, we get the front pinned, and that'll basically lock in the width of the hood in relation to the fender. That gap there and there. That's looking much better. So by tightening these areas up, our gap has become more consistent. So the other thing I have to do, like I mentioned, is fix this area through here because it tapers. Now we can set the height of the front valance. That's coming in not too bad there. Our features are aligning here as well as here. So we'll get this height set now. The little adjustment I did is too much. So we're sitting a bit low right now. Sitting a little bit low and the nose is brought in too much. That's much, much better. I'm just checking the alignment, the center. So we're We're sitting well there. We're sitting well here. But the peak is off just a little bit. Stretch things a little bit. That's not too bad there. We have a nice consistent gap. We'll have to adjust that there. So we're going to take and bolt in the latch area and set the height over here. I'm going to close the hood. I want to take a look and see how much it affected us. See, now we're getting latched. That's not good. See, that pushed the valance out to almost 3/4 of an inch. And that's wrong. So we're going to have to fix that. And this is where you can spend quite a bit of time going back and forth. See, not only did it push the valance ahead, it pushed the core support rearward. Like I mentioned, you can spend quite a bit of time readjusting a bracket like this just to get things to fit properly. And it can be frustrating, but you know, there's something that you have to do. Just looking at this front bracket again, people have been modifying stuff. So it sat very comfortably right here where I bolted it in. But we're actually inside the valance where the nuts are located on the valance and the latch bolts to the valance. So I have to take and rearrange the shape of it to basically allow me to just drop it in from the top and bolt it here and here. Right now we're in behind and that's not proper. So that's sitting a lot more comfortably now. Okay, let's get some bolts into this. See how it looks. Getting closer, but our flanges for the latch aren't lining up with the holes on this valance. Our peak is lining up. This is flush, that's nice, but we're off here. So okay, that's looking better. Much better there. Well, that's feeling and looking really nice. There was a big dip there from the stamping for this aftermarket panel. We're flush here on the front. When we close the hood, the gap inside here is just right. So that's all fitted up really well. I got the other side just about done. Need to finish sanding that. I've also got this urethane nose piece bolted on and fitted to the front fascia here, the front valance area. The only thing we noticed is the fact that this radius on this piece is different than this radius over here. This one's a lot softer. So it doesn't exactly match up to the radius on the valance panel. So we're gonna have to see what we can do about that. But overall, everywhere else is fitting up really nice. And we can pretty much move on to the bumperettes, get them fitted to the car on both sides, and that should be pretty much it for the front end. And I'll show you the front hood and see how that fits up in the front. See our gap there on the driver's side fender area? We have a nice consistent gap going all the way back. We fixed the rear edge of the hood, fixed that curvature there. And this front gap here is fitting up really well all the way through, and all the reflections you can see they're traveling through is nice and straight. See on the primer there? That's all coming in really nice there. And that gap is looking really good over here as well. Just about have this front end nailed. You guys saw the oxyacetylene bottles there. Sometimes you need a little bit of heat to massage the panels. Kind of heat them up and shrink them a bit in places just to get them to fit right. Just all part of the tools of the trade. Okay, so let's get the bottom bumperettes installed, get them fitted, bolt the lower valance to the upper valance, get that all set. So this here bracket, it sits in between the upper fender, the fender area, and the lower valance, and basically bolts into this area here. But we need to make sure that the inner fender well is sitting in the right spot and it gapped properly around the wheel arch here, so that when we bolt this together, everything fits precisely and we don't have this huge gap along the side of the car. You might come across a situation where you have to line up a common hole to get a bolt through between 2 or 3 layers of sheet metal, such as the fender, lower valance, and the wheel liner. And you just can't get that bolt to start. You know, you go through one layer, maybe the second layer, but you can't get it to start on the third layer. That's when you use an awl or a thin screwdriver, you slip it through another hole in the area, kind of pry it back and forth, nice and gentle, and it kind of aligns those panels a little bit better, lines the hole, and allows you to start your bolt. So a little trick you can do. Now I've got this panel bolted to the fender and it's all bolted together. But I'm looking at the feature here. You have a nice feature coming down off the fender, but this aftermarket panel just wasn't stamped that nice. This radius in the aftermarket panel isn't as prominent as the radius in the original fender. And I don't want this to get filled up with filler just to take care of that problem. We have to massage the aftermarket panel to match the same radius that we have up here. Now that can be done several ways. We can use a dolly and kind of work that in, but sometimes when you're tapping with a dolly you might miss the area you need to bump. So it's good but not great. I can use a slapper, but again the slapper, the radius doesn't match the concavity that we have here. So I've got this tool here for situations like this where I'll set it into place and then I'll smack this with another hammer and I can very gently guide this dolly into the right location as I'm hitting it. And as I'm hitting it, I'm not really beating on it, I'm just massaging the metal and watching what's happening and just kind of working that in together. So let's do that right now and fix up this radius here, and then we can get the bumperettes on. So I've moved out of the radius now and I'm onto the flat area to blend this, the area that I've just hammered down, to blend it into the existing panel. I can hear the change in pitch as I'm working it. That's really nice right there. Okay, now we're going to and there we have it, guys. A nice, smooth, seamless transition from one panel to the next. So that came out really, really good. What I'm going to work on right now is get this bracket in place for the bumperette. Get all that aligned and get the bolts in, get the bumperettes on, and gap everything in that area. Now that we have everything aligned there, all the other holes everywhere else are aligned perfectly. So I can just drop the bolts in and get everything bolted up. Now I'm not going to tighten everything up tight. It's going to be left kind of snug but loose, because what I want to do is get the bumperette onto the brackets, kind of, again, snug those up, gap everything, make sure we have a nice consistent gap. I've got the driver's side done already. I'll show you that in a second. But this is essentially the process of getting all this in place. So you see, it's kind of loose. That one's good. This one here has a very true hole, so it doesn't move around too much. We just have a little bit of movement on that one. So now I'm going to get the bumperette, get that in place. This is all lining up here, so I'll get the bumperette on, and then we'll get that spaced out. All this is going to have to come off after we go to prime everything, but it all has to be put on, spaced, fitted, to make sure that when we reassemble the car after paint, everything's going to fit. When we started, these bumper pieces, this one was sticking up almost 1.5 inches out past the body. It was ridiculous. I'm going to snug this up. Just kind of finger tight. I want to be able to move it. Okay. Not bad through there. Ah, there we go. See, I was able to get my fingers in before, now I cannot, and that's pretty much the gap. I'm going to get the tape measure, check it from side to side, make sure that we're good, and then we'll start tightening things up. All right, on the driver's side, to the extreme point, we have 5/8 of an inch. On the passenger side here, the way I set it by eye, it's 5/8 of an inch. So, after you do this long enough, you get a feel for gapping things. The other one I want to check is this one here. There we go. And we have 3/16, actually 1/8 at that gap there, at this seam. On the driver's side, we have 3/16, which means we need to come out just a little bit. Ah, look at that. And there's our 3/16. Let's double check this one for 5/8. Got to go in a smidgen. Okay, 5/8 of an inch and 3/16. All right, guys. Now we can snug everything up. I'm gonna start tightening up these little bumpers here. That's it. Even though it's moving up and down, it's not moving in or out. There we go. Double check one more time. 5/8 of an inch and 3/16. Okay, let's do the two bolts for the brackets, and we can call this done.